Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is holler, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Artem. Artem, thank you so much for sharing another great idea with us. Now, let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we can use this particular verb. The verb holler is frequently used to mean to give a loud shout or cry. This particular verb is, I think, a little more commonly used in southern US states versus northern ones. But again, if one hears this, many times they're going to think of that idea of loud noises being made by a person. A second way this verb gets used can mean to gripe or complain. And a third way, and a rather informal way to use it, means to contact someone, right? So we'll look at some examples of that very briefly, but for now, you should know that holler is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms hollering. The past tense and the participle form of this verb can be made by adding ed. Our base verb, holler, ends in an sound. That means when we add the ed suffix, we're just going to make a d sound. We're not going to add an extra syllable to this verb. So the past tense and the participle form of our verb should sound like this: hollered, hollered. Now, let's talk a little bit about some phrasal verbs. So, the first one you may hear or see people use could be to holler at. So, this ties back to that first definition. So, we're thinking of someone yelling or shouting either at someone or something, and it's typically being done in anger or frustration. So, an example of this might be: Mom and Dad are going to holler at you when they see this mess, right? So maybe one sibling's talking to another here, and what they're going to say: Mom and Dad are going to raise their voice. They're going to yell or shout. Now, a second way to use holler at goes back to the third definition, that very informal one where I said to contact someone. So, to holler at someone could also mean to speak to someone or to get in touch with someone. So, you might hear it used like an imperative. So, someone might say something like, holler at me the next time you're in town. Right? So here the person's not asking you to yell or shout, it's just saying, get in touch with me. This might be a way someone kind of informally extends an invitation to connect or meet up. Another phrasal verb you may encounter is to holler back. This generally means to respond by yelling or by shouting. So, an example of this: he hollered back insults as he was escorted outside. So, maybe someone is being rather rowdy and disruptive, and maybe someone has tried to talk, right? Get this person to settle down. He's being removed from the place, but he responds with more yelling. The last phrasal verb you may encounter is to holler out. Again, we're back to that first definition, just shouting or yelling something. So, an example of this: maybe you've heard a teacher say something like this: please don't holler out the answers, right? They're saying, don't shout it out, right? Maybe let's give people time to think and kind of form their own answer. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day, and we'll practice and review some of our verb tenses with it. Today, I thought it would be good to review the simple present and the simple future with a focus on will. Let's start with the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about our habits and our routines. So these would be actions that repeat again and again. We can also use it to discuss facts. And this is a verb tense where we really need to pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, or they in the affirmative, all you need to do is use this base verb. But if your subject is he, she, or it, you'll need to add an S to the end of the verb. So an example of this might be: this crowd always hollers at the referees. Right? So this might be the yelling in anger and frustration when they don't agree with a particular call or the call is going against the team in which they are rooting for. Now, if you want to make a negative simple present sentence, again, start with your subject. And we've got to pay attention to that subject. Again, if the subject is I, you, we, or they, our pattern will be to use do not and then the base verb. But if the subject is he, she, or it, we'll use does not and the base verb. Notice I'm not adding an S here to the end of the verb. So an example of this might be, she doesn't holler about minor inconveniences. This might tie back to the second definition about griping or complaining. So this is someone who's just kind of deals with those things that are maybe a little annoying or a little bothersome. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the simple present, start with do or does, whatever form matches your subject. That subject comes next. Then use the base verb. Again, I always like to point out to students, notice the only time I'm adding an S to the end of the verb is in the affirmative or with a positive sentence when the subject is he, she, or it. Here's my last simple present example. Do you holler at your cousins when you visit your hometown? Right? So someone might kind of want to know, do you have this habit of connecting with your more extended family when you're around? Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple future. Today we're going to make sentences with will. Will is commonly used as we discuss promises, or we make offers of actions we will do in the future. We'll also use it with predictions, and you may encounter some people using it with their plans, particularly if they're a little less confident in that plan actually happening. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple future with will is that our pattern stays the same no matter what our subject is. So we'll start with our subject, we'll use will, and then the base verb. You can see this in the example. Someone will holler out names to form groups for this next activity, right? So here is someone kind of predicting what's going to happen next. Now, if you want to make a negative simple future sentence using will, again, we're going to start with a subject. This time we'll use will not and then the base verb. You might also encounter the contraction won't, W-O-N apostrophe T. So here's maybe a promise a parent is going to make to their child. I won't holler and embarrass you, right? So maybe they're worried about a particular parent making too much noise at their concert or performance or some type of athletic competition. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the simple future with will, start with will, then you'll have your subject and then the base verb. Here's the last example. Will he holler when we give him the injection? So here, maybe we're thinking of a small child or perhaps a pet. And so you might be thinking of a jab, having medicine being delivered by shot. And so the medical staff here is kind of wanting to be prepared, right? Are there going to be loud yells and shouts of pain when this happens? Now let's spend a moment looking at some words and some phrases related to our verb holler. And the first word we're going to discuss today is just the noun form of this word. The noun holler has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. This particular noun can refer to a loud shout or a loud cry. An example of this might be, listen to all of the hollers coming from the theater. Right? So someone might be kind of wondering what's happening there, that there's so many cries or shouts occurring or coming from that particular direction. Now, I have two phrases for us to discuss. The first phrase you might encounter is to give someone a holler. This goes back to that third definition of the verb about contacting someone. In 2025, I know I've heard people even use this to really refer to texting. So I think it started with phone calls, but now it could be kind of any form of communication. So, an example of how you might hear this used: give him a holler when you need some help, right? So, someone here is saying, contact this person. Sounds like they're willing to lend a hand and be helpful. Another phrase you might encounter are the words hoot and holler together. Generally, this means that a person or group of people are voicing their displeasure or their unhappiness with something, usually with loud noises, so shouts and yells. An example of this might be: the crowd hooted and hollered when the event's cancellation was announced. So maybe people had gathered for some type of performance, and at the last minute, things get canceled. And so the crowd starts making this noise to voice their unhappiness with that particular decision. Thanks again to Artem for suggesting today's verb. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.